If you love movies and movie discussions, you've come to the right place. Who am I, you ask? I am the Wiz, and I'm here to review the 1979 sci-fi film Star Trek: The Motion Picture, starring William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, Nichelle Nichols, and many upon many of others that I have not listed, directed by Robert Wise. Yeah, so why am I starting with the Star Trek series? Well, the honest truth is, I didn't want to do Star Wars. To be quite fair, I've seen all of them, and honestly, I'm not that big of a fan of Star Wars, but I've also heard from people who are not a fan of Star Wars that they're actually a fan of Star Trek. So I was thinking to myself, maybe I'm more of a Star Trek person than I thought. And the reason I thought I wasn't a Star Trek person is because it honestly looked boring. It really did. But the J.J. Abrams remakes are the ones that I've seen, and I actually enjoyed two of them. I enjoyed the first one and Into Darkness. I thought those were pretty good. But so I thought, you know what? It might be just time for me to actually check out the original movies. Even though I have not watched the TV series, and that's going to be something that some of you might have a problem with when I review this movie today. So let's get into it. Let's get into the review of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, directed by Robert Wise. Before that, let's get into the plot. The Federation calls on Admiral James T. Kirk, played by William Shatner, and the crew of the Starship Enterprise to contain an immense cloud-like object that is set on a crash course to Earth. And there's more I could do on the plotline, but to be absolutely honest, I'm going to keep it at that. And the reason why I'm going to do that is pretty simple. When it comes to the plot and the characters, I think is not very good in this. It's lacking a good story and character development in its totality. If you're coming where I'm at, never watching any of the Star Trek TV series, you're not a fan of them, even though I was a fan of the remakes, but I think they were much more for a cinematic audience than anything else. But if you're coming into this not a fan of the TV series, this is a big problem, because you have no idea exactly who is supposed to be who, how they're supposed to act, why they are the way they are. You have no attachment. And honestly, I really think this film, if anything, feels like it's a for the fans movie. It is definitely a movie where you're watching this and it's doing a bunch of callbacks and it's doing a bunch of things where a fan will get really excited. It's everything from the way they introduce certain characters like Spock, Kirk, Scotty, and a bunch of the other people, to establishing shots of locations and specific types of areas and specific types of ships that are in the entire movie. And I gotta tell you, as much as I do like the special effects in this movie, they are really good even for today. They linger way too long on it. It's literally special effects porn in this movie. It's like, holy crap. I think they spent 4 minutes on James Kirk going from the port to the Enterprise. 4 minutes. And it's just a long, lingering shot of the Enterprise. And they do this a lot with other types of things too, like other types of ships, other types of locations. They linger a long time on there. And again, it looks impressive, but like after a few seconds, it's like, okay, you got anything else there? It's like anything at all. The way that they do the action too in this is they show a location, and then someone's reacting. The location, someone's reacting. The location, someone's reacting. And I'm sitting here going, is this all there is? Is this all there is? Like, to me, it feels like that watching this movie to see if you're a fan of Star Trek is a bad idea, because I just don't think it's a great representation of Star Trek if you're not a fan. But what I will say, even though I have a lot of gripes about this movie, there are interesting elements to make me want to continue watching the next movies. And this is what I was a little bit afraid of when watching the Star Trek movies. Maybe I'll realize in like 2 or 3 movies that, oh, these are bad. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to soldier on anyway. I'm going to definitely keep watching the Star Trek movies. But there are certain elements of Star Trek that I actually kind of enjoy from this movie that makes me want to just see if it improves moving forward. And it's really how everyone on the Enterprise interacts with each other and the uniform way everything is, and how there seems to be much more of an intelligent design when it comes to how the story is than I would say with something like Star Wars. Star Wars seems to be like, well, here's some great action sequences and then a force power and then something happens and boom, the good guys win. It just seems like something is much more thought out when it comes to a Star Trek movie and a Star Trek story that I think I will look forward to watching to see if they make it better in the next movie. But that's just me giving it the benefit of the doubt. If I'm basing it all on this movie that I just watched, I have to say it's pretty much a disappointment. All right, so here are the footnotes for Star Trek the Motion Picture, and I've only got one footnote. There is a good reason why the film is kind of a mess. So I did a little bit of cursory reading when it came to the Star Trek the Motion Picture, and it seems like there was two things that the movie was supposed to be at first. It was first supposed to be a TV movie, and then I believe it turned into a pilot for a TV series, or it might have been both, actually. It might have been a TV movie that was going to be backdoored into a pilot for what was called Star Trek Phase 2. And then somewhere along the line, they turned it into a movie. It really shows in the way that this film is written, how the story is, because there are so many pacing issues in this movie. It is slow on certain ends, and then on top of it being slow, the characters don't really seem that well defined. But again, I'm speaking to somebody who never watched the TV series, so they were probably expecting people to watch this movie to be fans of the TV series, and clearly I am not, so that might also be a problem. But it does make sense how this film is kind of a mess. Alright, so do I recommend it or do I not recommend it? Well, here's the thing. I'm a little torn on this, because on the one hand, I can see if you're a fan of Star Trek and you have not seen the movies, why you would enjoy this. You would enjoy the look of the special effects, and maybe the familiarity of the characters will take away the problems I would have with the movie, since I am not familiar with the characters. So on that end, I can understand. On the other hand, not being a fan of the TV series or haven't seen it at all, there really isn't anything that can really get you attached to the film. But on top of that as well, there is no action. It's very dialogue heavy, and the movie isn't really all that interesting when it comes to the dialogue as well. I'm gonna say I'm not going to recommend Star Trek the Motion Picture, but I will say this. This does not mean that I'm not interested in seeing the other Star Trek movies. I think this film was not meant to be how I was supposed to start watching Star Trek. It is clear that this movie was meant to be something for fans, as a celebration, and as something as like, oh my god, it's Kirk and Spock, and look at them on the big screen. I think that's what it was meant to be, and because I'm not that, I'm not getting that kind of vibe from it. I'm looking at it straight up as a picture of how the characters, how the plot, and all this, and being disappointed, and that's why I am not liking it. So I will say this. If you are a fan of Star Trek and you haven't seen it, I think you should. But overall, I'm going to not recommend Star Trek the Motion Picture. It is on Paramount Plus, and I think it's on free on some of the free services as well. So check that out if you're interested. Now, if you want my full review on this movie, you can go to my website at IamTheWiz.com. You'll have my full written review right on the site, along with a link to the video that has this review that you've just listened to. Thank you for listening to this review. If you want to know what we're reviewing in the next couple of days, you can look on the screen right now to see what's coming up next. If you like what you heard, go ahead and leave a like on this video. If you want to discuss your opinion on the film or the review itself, please leave a comment. And if you want to hear more, subscribe to the channel. Thank you again for listening. I will talk to you next time.